49 on the Crosstalk on WIZM. Let's spend a couple of minutes with a guy who would like to be your next congressman if you live in the 1st Congressional District in Minnesota. Brian Davis will be running against the Democrat who's been in office for a while. Brian is in our studio this morning. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks very much for having me here, Mike.
So why should Minnesota voters in the 1st District vote for you?
You know, we have a lot of problems that need to be addressed. We have problems in energy, we have problems in health care, and Washington isn't getting it done. I'm a private citizen. I'm not a career politician, but I did train as an engineer, and I am a physician. I'm used to solving problems, and I think Washington needs to solve problems and not create problems.
How can a newbie, if you're elected and you go to Washington, you're, in essence, low man on the totem pole?
Well, it's true that there are 435 congressmen in the U.S. House of Representatives, and it's one vote out of 435. But, a lot of important votes get down to just a handful of people. And I like to let people know where I stand. I can tell you right now what's on voters' minds, what's on my mind traveling across Minnesota, now into Wisconsin for this race, is that the price of gas is just through the roof, and Congress isn't getting it done.
I spoke earlier. I'm not sure you were in the area at that point. Todd Berry from the Wisconsin Taxpayers Alliance in a previous half hour, and one of the things that he mentioned while we were talking was, wouldn't it be refreshing if we heard from any politician running for office, never heard that politician say, "Vote for me and things will change. I will go to Madison or to Washington and make things better." Difficult, because you're right, you're one of only a handful of votes, but still it's only a handful of votes.
Well, and I also heard you speaking earlier, and what is appealing is that politicians sometimes promise things about what's going to get done.
Sure.
I can make a promise about how I'll vote and what I will advocate. And right now, we are not utilizing the resources in this country that we have at our disposal. We are the only country in the world that forbids offshore drilling. The only major industrialized country that forbids offshore drilling. And the Mineral Management Service of the U.S. Department of Interior estimates that we have close to 86 billion barrels of oil lying offshore in areas that are not being explored.
So you would be in favor of offshore or onshore drilling to try and
offshore,
capitalize on
onshore, and in Alaska, in ANWR, I think that needs to get done. And the technology has improved so much that it's much more environmentally safe and friendly. Why should we be sending literally hundreds of billions of dollars every year that goes against our trade deficit to foreign countries, some of which we're not on the best of terms with?
Then follow that up with drilling the oil. Now we have to refine it. Would you follow your vote up with the ability to put a refinery in your backyard?
I don't know that I have enough room in my backyard, or maybe not your backyard either. But where they're looking at South Dakota, it's very likely that there is a refinery that's going to go up in South Dakota. It's true we do have a shortage of refinery capacity in this country, but a lot of refineries that exist nowadays have actually increased their capacity over the past couple of decades. So this is something that we do need, new refineries, and we need to increase the capacity of the refineries that we have.
What do you like about alternative energy sources?
I think that we need to exploit every energy source that we possibly can to keep our modern economy moving forward smoothly. We see what happens when we put too many restrictions on industry to provide energy to consumers and to our industry. So alternative energy is very important. In southern Minnesota, we are leaders nationally in ethanol production and also wind power, and I'm proud of that. I am optimistic that over the long term, these alternative energy forms will be competitive on the free market. Right now, they do have, they're getting propped up a little bit in terms of blending credits and also mandates, alternative energy mandates. But right now, if you take the 4 major sources of energy that are consumed in this country, coal, oil, natural gas, and nuclear power, that's close to 93% of the energy that's produced. We cannot make that up if we have one that all of a sudden doubles in prices like oil has. Gasoline's doubled in price in the last couple of years, and that's about 40% of our energy consumption.
You think there's cheaper energy out there in the United States that we could be utilizing if we could get enough votes in favor of?
Yes, I do, and I applaud President Bush for removing the executive order to have a moratorium on offshore drilling that's been in effect since about 1981. Now, Congress needs to step up to the plate, and I will tell you, our congressman, Congressman Waltz, is silent about this. In fact, the past several weeks, he made a public statement that the American companies have access to 80% of offshore areas, and that's just not so. It's about less than 5% of areas offshore the United States are open for leasing and drilling. It's only off Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. And the eastern Gulf of Mexico, where the outer continental shelf goes out a couple hundred miles, that is an area that potentially has a great deal of oil, and it is ridiculous that we are purchasing this oil from the Mideast when we should be producing it here at home.
You live in Rochester, formerly a physician and an engineer. You're one of us. You're going to move to Washington and become one of them. What's going to keep you grounded?
You know, I grew up in the Midwest, and I grew up in a modest home, a single-bathroom home. My parents are teachers. I worked as a paper boy. I was a YMCA camp counselor, worked in fast food restaurants, even did some door-to-door work when I was in high school. And I've spent time at some big institutions on the East Coast, training and in graduate school, but I've come back home to the Midwest where a lot of the solid American values are. And I'm not going there to build a new career, and I have a couple of big elections ahead in this race, so we take nothing for granted. But I know that talking to people all across Minnesota, that we do need to have different policies in Washington. Government needs to get out of the way. I think that there's a difference in philosophy that Ronald Reagan used to talk about, that people sometimes look for government to solve problems, but we got to realize that very often, particularly in our energy crisis today, government is the problem.
Brian Davis, thanks very much for stopping in this morning. Glad you got here before the torrential rains, which you brought with you from Rochester.
Well, not yet, but thanks very much for having me here this morning. It's great to be here.
Absolutely, our pleasure. It's 8:56. Mark Meyer, speaking of torrential rain, keeping an eye on traffic and weather on the 6s, has a look at, you mentioned sprinkles earlier. Mark, what's going on right now?
Well, it's sort of tapered off.